Correct me if I'm wrong, but all Green Lantern powers come from their will. So, how does Alan Scott still have his powers if he's this throwback emo boy moping around whining about his life every 35 seconds? Every time I read an issue from this miniseries, I have to remind myself that Alan Scott is supposed to be a superhero. He's supposed to be the Green Lantern. He's supposed to get his powers from his will. I have to keep telling myself this is how his powers work because you never get that from reading the book. Alan Scott spends the entirety of the first 3 issues going full-on emo boy. Screw having the willpower to use a magic ring, this man lacks the willpower to make a cup of tea. If he took a deep breath, he might pass out from the effort. This whole series was meant to be Tim Sheridan's middle finger to the right-wing chuds, but he somehow managed to use all the fingers but the one that matters. The most obvious thing to do is tell a story where Alan Scott takes it to the anti-gay people in the 1940s, but for some reason, Sheridan didn't do that. Despite the overt homophobia of the 40s, you'll find very little description of it in the first 3 issues. This includes at the insane asylum where they're literally torturing gay men. All instances of mistreatment are just little forgettable snippets, barely more than a couple of panels. As for our titular hero, he spends all his time going, woe is me. This book was supposed to be about showing that gay people could be superheroes, but instead all Alan does is whine. He's not strong, he's not heroic. In fact, he's so broken that he needs a hug from the spirit of vengeance just to make it through the day. That's not a joke, look at the screen. He's getting hugged by the Spectre because he's sad, and you wonder why these books don't sell. So, this issue picks up with Derby driving around some mystery man who's obviously Johnny Ladd, Alan's former and clearly not dead boyfriend. Along the ride, Derby spots Alan, but Alan ignores him. Why? Because he's heading to the docks, a hookup spot for gay men. While at the docks, he talks to a guy who tells him that they have to be quick because the cops are cracking down on the area. He also mentions that a guy named Tommy, the same guy Alan found in the previous issue, is dead and that he was wearing combat boots, which was strange because he was never in the military. Then the cops show up and raid the place, and Alan slips on his ring to get away. Now, you'd think he'd have kept on the ring because he could use his power to hide it and mask his face, but that really isn't the problem. The problem is this. Didn't he just get blackmailed by J. Edgar Hoover over his sexuality? Didn't Hoover literally use Green Lantern's real name? Didn't he have pictures of Alan with Johnny? Why in the world would Alan Scott go to the docks in the middle of the day when he knows that the director of the FBI is spying on him? It's only been a couple of days since their meeting. Why would you give Hoover more ammo against you? Better yet, when Scotty the rent boy tells Alan about the raids, shouldn't Alan assume that this too has something to do with Hoover? After all, it wouldn't be a stretch that Hoover would use the local police to crack down on spots Alan visits just to control him. Even better yet, shouldn't Alan find it curious that all the men who've died have had on combat boots, the same type Alan wore in the photos that Hoover had, the same boots Hoover told Alan to bring for a weekend romp? I haven't looked at the first book in months, and when I read that line, that was the first thing that popped into my mind. So if it's obvious to me, wouldn't it be obvious to the dude getting blackmailed? Now, I want you to know, Tim Sheridan didn't do this by accident. Oh no, Alan Scott is stupid on purpose. Why he's stupid is up for grabs, but it's definitely intentional. Alan goes to check out Tommy's body at the morgue. He calls the Flash in for help, although it's not clear what the Flash is supposed to be helping with. According to Green Lantern, the cops didn't create a case file for Tommy's death, and already closed the bank case. Alan assumes this is because the men were gay, and therefore considered criminal deviants, so investigating their deaths would be a waste of resources. The Flash tries to cheer him up, but Alan throws it back in his face, so Jay says, I see this as personal, which makes Alan defensive. Basically, he thinks Jay knows he's gay, tries to goad Jay into saying it, but all the Flash does is say that cases like this are why the JSA exists. I'm guessing that Sheridan meant for this scene to recontextualize Jay Garrick's bias. Instead, it makes Alan look stupid. Why? Because he invited the Flash to help, and then immediately went, I don't want your help. So why invite him? Alan seems to think Jay knows that the men are gay, and that so is he, but the moment Jay hints at this, Alan cops an attitude. Again, how did the Flash get here? The Green Lantern invited him. If you don't want the man's help, why is he here? Then, to top it off, Jay says that it doesn't matter anyway, because another JSA member, the Spectre, was already assigned to the case. He also says that the team had another meeting that Alan missed, harkening back to the first issue where Hoover said that he assigned cases to the JSA and expected the Green Lantern to be at all those meetings. At no point does Alan think about any of this, of how it's unbelievably coincidental that the JSA, specifically the Spectre, is already involved in this case where the victims were killed in the same way as Alan's boyfriend. He should be super suspicious of Hoover by now, but instead, he misses this just to play the victim. This is madness. None of it makes any sense. So, how could you make this work? Well, the easiest way would be if the Green Lantern tried to investigate this on his own and the Flash just showed up uninvited. Alan tries to get rid of him so he can keep his sexuality a secret, but Jay says that the team was assigned to the case. Then you could have Alan say his bit about the way that the law regards gay people, and that way his defensive response would make sense. He has good reason to assume his teammates wouldn't like gay men, and now with Hoover's blackmail, an even better reason to be hostile to anyone questioning his sexuality. This way, it would look like the Flash is accusing Green Lantern of being gay as an attack, instead of realizing that because of Alan's sexuality, he might care more about this case. But then that would make sense, and this isn't that kind of story. No, this is the kind of story where our hero lacks basic logic skills. Alan goes to meet up with the Spectre, who snatches up a criminal and reads his mind to get the info he needs about Tommy's case. He discovers that the case file was in the records room of the 1st precinct, even though the case was handled by the 10th precinct. Alan keeps trying to get rid of the Spectre, but in his regular life, Jim Corrigan is a detective, so it really makes no sense to do this. Corrigan tells Alan that the criminal's girlfriend works in the records office and tells the guy about every case that comes in because he's actually working for the mob and checking in for his boss. Alan and Corrigan find the file and discover that it's not only in the wrong precinct, but empty, and Alan thinks he knows why. The police won't investigate the case because the victims are gay. And then Tim Sheridan has the Spectre hip-check the hero of the story by pointing out the obvious. If the cops wanted to ignore a crime, they wouldn't create an empty file just to hide it somewhere else. They would never create the file. The cops would only create an empty file if they planned to put something else in it, something that would point, quote, toward a man whose connection to these victims would surely be called salacious by the newspapers. A man with a whole host of secrets that make him vulnerable to everything from blackmail to bogus murder charges. A man who, were it to be revealed that he has the power to walk through police station walls and put his hands on an active case file, would look awfully guilty. I'd say someone's trying to frame you, Alan Scott. Yes, and his name is the Spectre, 'cause you're the dude who brought him here and told him to sift through files with his bare hands. Now, imagine this guy revealed that he knows you're being blackmailed, knows your real name, knows about your sex life, and literally told you to do the thing that now implicates you in file tampering. Would you A, whoop his undead ass, B, exercise your right to remain silent and just leave, or C, pour your heart out to the dude who sounds like he's trying to blackmail you? It's C, by the way. If you were curious, it's C. Alan Scott goes touché, and then, unprompted, admits to escaping from an insane asylum and admits that all the men were connected to him. Why in the world does this happen? So that Tim Sheridan can have the Spectre affirm Alan Scott's sexuality and tell him that God loves him and doesn't care about him being gay. For 2 whole pages. Make no mistake, this was done to own the chuds, to stick it to them by having the spirit of God's vengeance hug the gay guy. There's just a couple of problems. 1, conservatives aren't going to buy any of this. Not the book, nobody's buying that. I mean the scene. They're not going to buy that the Spectre would say this. They're just going to say that you're putting words in God's mouth, and of course they're not going to like it, because that's their job. 2, you don't need 7 panels to do this. You could do it in 7 words. Instead of Alan begging the Spectre to leave, the Spectre could follow him and impose himself into the case, getting closer to how these men are connected to Alan Scott. The Spectre could give his little monologue, but end with this. Why would anyone want to frame Alan Scott? He could even go into a diatribe about homosexuality, so that Alan then decides to admit that he's gay. But before he can get the words out, the Spectre could go, I don't care. And as he flies away says, and neither does he. Done. 7 words, done. And now you don't have 4 paragraphs of stuff for the right to complain about. Instead, if they want to complain, they'll have to make things up. 3, the Spectre is canonically a homophobe. I didn't know anything about the Spectre, so I looked up the character just to see if this is another one of those recontextualized scenes like in the previous issue. And wouldn't you know, back in '96, there was an issue where the Spectre shows that he's anti-gay. Some Christians attack a gay couple and kill one of the guys. The Spectre appears and confronts the killer, kills him, and then asks why the men attacked the couple. They answer that the couple are gay, so the Spectre tells the killers that he won't kill them, but instead let them wait for the cops to arrive. When the surviving gay dude objects and asks why, he realizes the reason. It's because he's gay. And the Spectre is basically like, yeah. Then he goes to speak to his priest friend about the incident, and the priest asks what the Spectre would do if the priest said that he was gay, to which the Spectre responds by leaving. The Spectre then goes to heaven to talk to the Archangel Michael and ask a very specific question. Are there any homosexuals in heaven? Michael says that there's some of everyone in heaven. Spectre goes, but are there any homosexuals in heaven? And Michael's like, what part of there's some of everyone in heaven was unclear. This throws the Spectre for a loop, and the rest of the issue deals with the various ways that this bias plays out in different people, as well as an attempt to both sides the issue by having someone from the pro-gay crowd try to firebomb a church. At the end of the issue, the Spectre goes back to his priest friend and says that if the priest can deal with Corrigan being dead, Corrigan can deal with the priest being gay. And then the priest reveals that he's not gay. He just asks what the Spectre would do if he were, and then gives some weak sauce line about equality under the gospel and the law. Now, why did I explain all of that? Well, that's because it's still canon. So what Tim Sheridan wants readers to believe is that in the 1940s, during the height of anti-gay attitudes, the Spectre was comforting gay dudes. But in the 90s, at the height of the gay rights movement, he hates them and thinks it's okay to kill them. That's a massive shift that makes absolutely no sense. You have to explain how he would have shifted his views that drastically. It also throws away a perfect moment for Alan to confront the bias of the times. Him taking the Spectre to task or just not letting the Spectre's bias get to him would show Alan's strength and will. Instead, it's like Sheridan treats the scene as a chance to recontextualize the Spectre by making him sympathetic to Alan's situation. Here's the problem with that. The way he did it makes Alan look weak. The Green Lantern's powers are based on his will. The stronger his will, the more powerful he'll be. And yet what we see in this book is a weak-willed man ruled by his emotions. Nowhere in these 3 issues has Alan shown that he has anything close to an indomitable will. He's moping around so much that the Spectre has to cheer him up. How is this dude a superhero? How does he even still have his powers? Tim Sheridan said in his video that this series was meant to show that gay people could be heroes too. Well, I'm still waiting to see that. You were supposed to be owning the right. Well, you're not doing it like this. Nobody is owned. Covered in piss from laughing so hard, yes, but not owned. And here's the thing. There's an easy way to do this. Give the right what they want, but not the way they want it. The right wants gay people to be miserable. Okay, give them that. Show how Alan Scott is reprimanded as a child for his deviancy. Show how he's medically treated for his mental disorder. Show how he suffers as he tries to keep his perversion a secret. That's what they want. That's what they'll get, but not the way they want it. While all of this would make Alan miserable, it wouldn't break him. No, his suffering would strengthen his resolve. Remember, a Lantern's power comes from his will. This isn't a man who needs to be hugged by the Spectre. Alan would be a man who wouldn't hide his sexuality, wouldn't fear the consequences, wouldn't tolerate the torture of other people. This is a man who, when they told him to break, would say, "Make me," before he got his powers. This is a man who would care deeply about his partners and probably would make sure nothing happened to them now that he has money and power. When he finds out that they're being killed because of their connection to him, oh, that would hurt him, especially given what they might have gone through in their lives. But not as much as he's going to hurt whoever did it. When he is at his lowest, that is when he stands back up. That's what makes him worthy of the green flame. That's what this story should be about if Tim Sheridan wanted to stick it to the right. Give them everything they wanted to see, every depraved act they call base, because it's being done to a gay guy, and show how none of that can break Alan Scott's will. That's all Tim Sheridan had to do. Instead, we get 3 issues of an emo boy and then a reveal that the Crimson Flame is Johnny Ladd, because whoever could have guessed something that obvious. The easiest way to have made that work was to have the murders happen first, and then have Hoover blackmail Alan, so Alan would connect the murders to the pictures and to Hoover, which could have been Johnny exploiting Hoover, so that Alan wouldn't realize he was still alive, literally off the top of my head as I typed this. I promise, it's not because I'm that good of a writer. It's that Sheridan's story is just that bad. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.